Utica, New York, a large city in the central part of the Empire State. While it never achieved the size or notoriety of other cities along the Erie Canal in New York, it was no doubt important, a city that initially grew off of the Erie Canal and maintained relevance through the textile industry. It would experience over 100 years of population growth. Today, it stands much smaller than it once was, a victim to changing trends in infrastructure and industry. This is what happened to Utica, New York. Utica, New York was established in 1798. A fairly old city, it would stay relatively small in its early decades, achieving only about 3,000 inhabitants by 1820. It would, however, see and maintain much growth when one of the largest and most significant infrastructure projects in New York State history, the Erie Canal, was completed in 1825. Utica would be roughly 1/3 of the way down the canal going westbound, and roughly 2/3 of the way down the canal going eastbound, giving it an ideal spot along the route that would ultimately connect the Atlantic Ocean to the Great Lakes. Once the canal was opened, the city would experience massive population growth, expanding by a factor of 4 times in the 1820s and 30s. While rail infrastructure would develop and begin to compete with the canal, the Erie Canal would maintain much relevance throughout the 1800s and would even be expanded in the 1860s, further helping Utica maintain a position of importance in New York State infrastructure. The city would, by the mid-1800s, be more than just an important canal stop, however, as it was around this time that it would become a major player in the textile industry. Milling of textiles would become a new mainstay in Utica, via the production of clothing and material for things such as sheets and cloth. As such, the city would see and maintain steady and stable population growth, with double-digit percentage population growth every decade from 1830 to 1920. Peaking in population at 101,740 in the 1930 census. By the early 1900s, Utica was simply a hub in the textile industry. By 1912, there were 25 mills located there, and by the late 1910s, 25,000 people were employed in the region in it. World War I, though, would have a profound impact on the city's economy, both growing it and contracting it. Several thousand would be employed at Utica's Savage Arms plant during the war, and the war no doubt caused high demand for textiles as well. It was, however, not to last. Demand for weapons simply wasn't there after the war, and demand for textiles began to drop significantly. And by the early 1920s, there were less than a quarter of the textile mills that there were in Utica in 1912. Later, particularly in the 1930s, newer materials such as rayon, nylon, and polyester began to penetrate the market, making cotton-based New York textiles less competitive. While the textile industry certainly wasn't what it was by the 1920s and 30s, Utica's population would remain relatively stable from 1930 to 1960, hovering around 100,000. By the late 1940s, though, textile milling in Utica had another major blow, with several mills deciding to relocate from the region entirely to be closer to southern cotton. Despite the losses in jobs of the textile industry, local residents of status were able to find new businesses and industries to come to Utica. This would provide a good offset to the losses in the textile jobs, at least for a while. Companies such as GE and Bendix would come to the city, with GE having as many as 6,000 employees in Utica at one point in time. While this would keep the city afloat through the 1950s, the Erie Canal, which originally put Utica on the map, would be largely rendered obsolete in this decade in a twofold blow. This would happen when the New York State Thruway would open in 1954, and then, in 1959, the St. Lawrence Seaway. The 60s would show signs of the prosperity waning, with the city losing nearly 9% of its population that decade. Suburbanization was on the uptick as well, as county population gained in the 1960s, and losses in county population from the 70s to 90s stayed well behind the losses Utica experienced. Textile milling would cease completely in this era. GE would cease operations in 1992, and in 1995, nearby Rome, New York, another city in decline, would lose its military base that employed 5,000, all of which no doubt affected Utica severely. Utica would lose roughly 40% of its population from 1960 to 2000, and it was clear that its luck had run out. despite its ability to adapt over the years. These losses have generally leveled off in the last 25 years though, with some small increases in population from 2000 to 2020. Today the city's economy is generally centered around services in healthcare and education. The only major manufacturing today comes from ConMed Medical. So what happened? Utica was a victim of its location in more ways than one. Its first reason for its rise, the Erie Canal, lost relevance over the decades to improved transportation infrastructure and technology. The second reason for its rise, textiles, was not close to the southern US where cotton was sourced. Once the industry decided to move closer to the supply, that hurt the city immensely. Lastly, there was the general Rust Belt decline in manufacturing experienced by many cities within the region, due to the inability of the region to compete with foreign manufacturing. This would be the final blow to the city's adaptability in its economy. Today, it exists as a smaller version of what once was, but is a lasting reminder of the great prosperity and impact the Erie Canal left on the state of New York. Thank you for watching.